In today's video, I'm going to show you a few different ways you can utilize a Dawless setup for live performance and live streaming. This all started running through my mind a couple weeks ago when I rebuilt my Dawless setup and started doing some live streams. And ever since then, I've been thinking about different ways I could utilize the setup for live performance, transitioning between songs and things like that, without just doing a strict DJ set. It got my mind thinking about all the different ways you can use a Dawless setup to perform parts, but also have backing tracks or sequences that you're making live. There's a lot of flexibility when it comes to a Dawless setup, and I've done some performances with a laptop and things like that, but it's just not as fun as having just a couple pieces of hardware. So that's what we're here today to figure out. What's the best way, at least for me, to do a live stream or live set with just a Dawless setup, no computer. So with that, let's go make a live set. Alright, so the first method of live performance with the Dawless setup is having some sort of sequencer or brain to your setup, and then either just using that or sending signal from that into other pieces of hardware. And so with this setup that I have currently, that would be taking circuit tracks, and you have internal synths, you've got MIDI synths, so this one's being sent to the Roland, and then you've got another one, and then you've also got sample tracks. They're called drum tracks, but you can put, like I've loaded my own samples into it, and you could even do melodic samples. Now, as I've talked about in previous Songs from Scratch videos, the sampling workflow on the circuit tracks is very limited. So I wouldn't call it a sampler. It's really a sequencer and a groove box, I guess is the proper term for it. But it does have some small sampling functionality. So let's see what it sounds like doing this first method, the sequences on hardware. So we'll start with just MIDI, going to the Roland TR-8. So that's the first one. Now, that's just performing a song. Now the hard part would be, how do we transition to another song, right? And so you could, of course, put scenes in here and then maybe just end with just the drums, or you could just shut off everything but the drums and have the next track or the next project start with that same beat and then switch pattern to have another beat. So yeah, that's the first method. I've been using it a lot for these Dawless jams. What holds me back on doing just this type of thing is the circuit tracks is very limited from a sampling functionality point of view, but it's also very limited with what's there. You get 4 synths or 3 synths and a drum machine, or any sort of mix you make, and then you've got the 4 sample tracks. That's it. So that brings us over to the second method that I like to use for live sets, which would be incorporating some form of a sampler and effects box or effects unit. For me, in this instance, it's the Roland SP404 Mark II. This thing is incredibly powerful. There's a ton you can do with it, but what I like most about it is you can load in full tracks into each of these pads, and it has that DJ mode that I mentioned before. But what's even cooler than that is the fact that you can sample into it. Like for this pad right here, that is a sample from Synth 1, one of the patches I made on it. Then you can go Shift 4, which is Shift Chromatic, and you've got a whole chromatic range of that same note or chord. So what I did there was you can create whole chord progressions out of just one sample. And you can sample anything into it, and then with this resample, you can do all this cool stuff. Like, this was a project I was working on yesterday. I took 2 synth sounds from the synth 1, and I made these. What is awesome about the SP is it's got bus effects. And so when I recorded in, I had this sound going into bus 1, and I added 404 vinyl sim and made it really noisy and warped. So there's a little noise, there's some warping going on, the pitch. And then you can have the live performance that you're sending from the tracks, they can go into bus 2. And so, like, for example, let's just turn on a couple sounds. You can have effects running. Let's put on reverb. But these synths, or these samples, aren't being affected by it. Cool in that way, because you can have sounds on here that aren't being affected by the effects that you put on what's going through here. And then there's also 2 master effects. In this case, I have a small bit of cassette and a bit of compression to kind of level out the sound. It's almost mastering the audio while it's being performed. So it's nice in a live setting or in a live stream, you can have decent sounding audio just straight out of the box. Now, not only do I have a bigger range of samples, I can put less stuff in here, or more melodic stuff, and then have chords in here. And I can also free up some space to perform on this, because I've got chords playing. I'm going to put some reverb on bus 1, and I think we'll start with an isolator on bus 2. So that's the second version of performing live. Because you have this added bit of effects, you can hold a note now at the end, or hold, a whole segment. And now you can switch projects, and then once you get it all set up, and we're in a new song. So that's a cool way that you could do transitions with the added bit of a sampler and effects unit compared to when we just had the sequencer. So now the last way that I see it is using a DJ set. So I've got a couple tracks. These are full tracks. This is my song Star Guide, this is my song Farther, and this is my song Moonwash, and there's a couple others. But you can do a DJ set where you can cue up. So we'll put Moonwashed on one, and then we'll put Future Fade on the other. And so now these knobs are the faders for the two channels. So when you've got a song playing, now you can do some effects. So I've got this mega vinyl scene going on right now, and I'll shut it off when the beat comes in. So that's just an idea of what you can do in the DJ mode. So this was just kind of talking out loud, figuring out the different ways that I see you can perform live with a Dawless setup, no computer. I'm pretty stoked with how the 404 fits into this workflow, but also can do its own thing if I ever wanted to just bring it out on its own with this DJ sets. I mean, you could even do full tracks with just samples and drums, right? Like, you could just do... carried away there, but you could just do full performances on this, but that's not what I want to do. My thinking is kind of utilize it all. We can do certain tracks where you're using all this hardware and you're performing samples and effects on here, and then maybe there's a couple of vignettes where I just perform something, and then maybe there's a few vignettes as I switch parts that are just playing some small sample segments, and then I can also do a couple tracks where I go into DJ mode and I can just trigger all these different effects and things like that. This is just kind of talking out loud, figuring out the way I want to perform live. But I think this is an important topic to cover if you're getting into Dawless setups and you either want to do live streams or do live sets and you don't want to bring a bunch of gear, but you'd like to have either no computer or very minimal computer setup. So I think a mix of all these different methods is the way to go for me, but I'm curious to hear what you think. Hopefully you found some value in this video if you are looking into doing Dawless sets or have a Dawless setup, or if you're looking into buying a Dawless setup. There's a lot of flexibility with these setups. They're tons of fun. If you've been watching my channel for a bit, you can see my progression as I go from a DAW, using the DAW in a lot of ways, to now a lot of my stuff is being done on the SP, treating that almost as the DAW, and then these other bits like the circuit and the mini-log and the drum machines or other synths, those are all accessories that I'm actually performing on rather than set MIDI or set sequences on them. But yeah, that's just where I'm at. I do new videos every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Pacific. And if you want to help support the channel, you can head to the Bandcamp link in the description where I have all of my music. I also now have a Patreon. If you want to support my channel in a sustainable way, there's early access to videos, Dawless jams. You can head to the link in the description or patreon.com/Sunwarper. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.